Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. The day I first moved into my house was one of great pride and triumph. My journey to homeownership had been a long and arduous one, driven by the memory of my hardworking mother and her dream of owning a home. As a single mother, she had faced countless challenges, struggling to make ends meet while providing for me. When she passed away, I vowed to fulfill her dream, working relentlessly to achieve that goal. After carefully considering various options, I finally found the perfect house situated slightly away from the town's bustling center. Its spacious yard and garage were ideal for my passion for restoring classic cars. Over the years, I diligently worked to expand my collection, with the crown jewel being the first car I had lovingly restored, a 1969 Dodge Charger, a cherished relic that held deep sentimental value. As time went by, the neighborhood underwent a transformation. Many original residents moved away, making room for new faces, and thus a homeowners association was formed. Although I never desired to be part of it, the association insisted that their rules applied to everyone, including me. Unfortunately, the homeowners association president Marley had an insatiable thirst for power, imposing exorbitant fines for minor infractions in a shameless money-making scheme. Nonetheless, my dedication and hard work paid off, not only in my professional life, but also in my personal pursuits. My garage became a treasure trove of vintage cars, a testament to my unwavering passion. However, as the garage reached its capacity, my neighbor Jeffrey suggested I park the cherished Charger in my front yard. His own car was parked in a similar fashion due to the lack of a garage. He assured me that as long as it wasn't obstructing the sidewalk, no one would object. Finding no alternative, I followed his advice, placing the Charger in the front yard. Its presence offered solace, a connection to my late mother and her undying spirit, yet Marley couldn't resist exerting his authority. In no time, I received a letter claiming the car was an eyesore and marred the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal. Undeterred, I discarded the letter, refusing to let anyone dictate the fate of my beloved Charger. As Marley's rule persisted, the neighborhood endured a cascade of departures. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, drowning his sorrows in alcohol and wreaking havoc with his reckless driving. Jeffrey informed me that Marley's wife had left him, adding to the growing list of residents fleeing his oppressive reign. It seemed as though his self-inflicted demise was imminent. One fateful night, I was awakened by a thunderous crash, a cacophony that shook me to my core. Little did I know the horrifying truth that awaited me. As I stumbled outside, a nightmarish scene unfolded before my eyes. The remnants of my once pristine Charger lay in ruins. Shocked and devastated, I stood frozen, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the destruction. Jeffrey, too, was appalled by the sight, questioning what had happened. With a sinking feeling, I knew in my heart that Marley had deliberately demolished my car. Determined to confront him, I stormed to his doorstep, demanding answers. Predictably, he feigned innocence, claiming ignorance and asserting he had been asleep all night. Refusing to accept his lies, I insisted on reviewing the security camera footage installed by the Homeowners Association throughout the neighborhood. To my dismay, the system reported that the cameras had mysteriously been turned off for the past 2 weeks. Anger and despair consumed me as I filed a complaint with the police, though the lack of evidence hindered their ability to take immediate action. Just when despair threatened to engulf me, Jeffrey arrived at my doorstep, clutching a lifeline. His car's dashcam had inadvertently recorded the entire ordeal, the bulldozer mercilessly crashing into my Charger. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, we wasted no time in pursuing legal action against Marley. The bulldozer's license plate linked back to him, exposing his despicable act of vengeance. In court, Marley's arrogance and deceit crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. The judge ruled decisively in my favor, ordering Marley to pay a staggering $150,000 in damages. Justice prevailed, but the aftermath was even more satisfying. Marley's world crumbled as his wife left him, forcing him to abandon the neighborhood he had ruled with an iron fist. Jeffrey, a trusted neighbor, assumed the position of Homeowners Association president, earning the community's overwhelming support. Though the wreckage of my Charger could never be fully restored, the compensation I received allowed me to find solace in a new beginning. With the funds, I embarked on a mission to locate and acquire another Dodge Charger, Although it required meticulous repair and the salvaging of usable parts from the wreckage, I breathed life into this new acquisition. It could never replace the sentimental value of the original, but its resurrection served as a testament to my resilience and unyielding spirit. In the end, the tyrannical reign of Marley crumbled, replaced by a neighbor who genuinely cared for the community's well-being. And as the new Charger roared to life, its engine a symphony of triumph, I vowed to carry on my mother's legacy, creating new memories and cherishing the dreams she had passed on to me. The next one is a pro-revenge story. In college, my two friends and I decided to find a place together off campus. We found a beautiful 3-bedroom house with surprisingly affordable rent. The basement of the house was listed as a separate apartment, but as it had a separate entrance and the indoor stairwell had been blocked off, we weren't worried, and the thermostat was upstairs. Then the demon neighbor moved in. From upstairs we could hear everything. This adult woman would call her mother and scream at her to pay for her cell phone bills and give her grocery money, aka Taco Bell and cheap tequila. She would scream at whatever guy she was sleeping with to bring her meth, and one day she brought home 3 puppies to scream at too. We were terrified of this woman and the noise was hell. Also, we'd been idiotic enough to sign a lease stating we were responsible for all utilities, period, meaning we were now financing her gas, water, and electricity. But with only 2 months left on the lease, we thought we could just ride it out. But then she started smoking, constantly. According to the landlord, she'd quit for good when she'd signed the lease, but for good only lasted 2 days. Since it was winter, the heat was running nearly 24/7, and the smoke was wafting up from the vents. Our apartment and all our belongings began to reek of smoke. We contacted the landlord because we'd signed for a bloody non-smoking apartment. He told us we lived in a state where you could technically call an apartment non-smoking, even if it shared ventilation with a smoking apartment. Duck you, leasing laws. At this point, my 2 roommates were heading out for a 2-week vacation. They were online students while I was residential, leaving me alone in the apartment with the demon smoker in the basement. I couldn't sleep or eat because my idiotic stomach decided to react to all the secondhand smoke by aching and cramping constantly. After 3 days, I was a little insane. I made a plan. I checked the forecast, lows in the 20s all week. I borrowed a friend's ultra-insulated sleeping bag. I bought one of those ski masks with the holes for your eyes and mouth. I got out my stocking cap, my silk-long underwear, my woolen socks, and my down parka. I bought tea, hot cocoa, and ramen and prepared to live off a diet of hot liquids, and I turned off the ducking heat. Day 1. She's screaming at her mother for forcing her to move into this frozen crap hole of an apartment. Day 2. She's screaming at her boyfriend, meth dealer, because he won't let her move in with him. Day 3. She's screaming at the landlord about how she's ducking freezing. Day 4. The landlord is at my door. I greet him in full ski mask / parka / stocking cap array, looking like I'm heading out to rob Santa Claus at the North Pole. He asks me if I don't find it a little chilly in the house. I reply I'd found all the cigarette smoke a little warm. Day 5. She's screaming about the idiots upstairs to anyone who will listen. And I'm sitting upstairs clutching my car keys and my pepper spray with 911 typed into my phone. She finally decides she's ducking leaving and moving in with Greg, even though he just got out for stabbing Travis, and he lives in that ducking creepy house in the woods with all those a-hole biting dogs. Day 6, she's gone. I silently bless Greg. Moral of the story, there's a bloody reason the rent seems too good to be true. The next one is a petty revenge story. My neighbors have 9 cars in total parked on the street. They always park 2 of those cars in front of my house and won't move them for the entire week. We have a regulation where I live that states you can't leave your car parked for more than 48 hours in the same spot. My neighbors have a pretty big driveway where they can fit 4 cars, but it's always empty. They have told me they don't like to leave their driveway with cars because it looks tacky. Over half of the cars they have, they don't even use. They just use them to save parking spots for themselves. In 2021, I noticed they were building a second unit behind their main house. I noticed that they completed the house in under a month. This raised some red flags because it takes anywhere from 2-3 months, with city inspections taking the majority of the time. I submitted a ticket with my city through the app and advised them that there might be some illegal residential building without permits. I didn't think much of it until a year later. I noticed my neighbors tearing down their second unit last week. Word got around our block that a city inspector was there making sure everything was being torn down. Based on the materials and labor they put into their second unit, it must have cost them over $100,000. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Years ago, I was a low-level IT manager at a major media company. My team was understaffed with too many projects to handle and no IT tester to test our apps. Consequently, the programmers, the product owner, a non-technical member from the business side, and I had to test the apps ourselves. The IT director, my boss, never assisted with these issues due to budget constraints. It was widely known that the company had been facing major financial problems for years. It was challenging, but we managed to take care of our apps adequately. Our primary project involved redesigning our sports news app, which generated substantial revenue through mobile ads. The app was over 8 years old and worked like a very old car. Thus, we decided to build it from scratch. However, progress was slow since we also had to update and fix numerous other apps, and we were essentially operating with a skeleton crew. The problems began when the product owner left, and was replaced by someone who, in my opinion, was completely unsuitable for the role. This individual displayed a lack of concern for the product, the users, and her colleagues. Her only priority was to please her boss, a business director. She was essentially an ideal yes man. Moreover, she was lazy and lacked any genuine experience or knowledge in mobile app development. She never undertook any significant tasks that the former product owner had handled. Her activities mainly involved organizing and attending meetings, drinking coffee, and idling away time on the internet. This wasn't a major issue for me since I performed my job well and everything was progressing as planned. Furthermore, her behavior was somewhat acceptable. However, the crucial point is that she never tested the app, nor did she have any interest in understanding it. In fact, I can't recall ever seeing her use any of our apps. One day, she informed us about an internal deadline for completing our app, which was set for February 1st, nearly a full year later. However, this deadline was merely for budgeting purposes, and wasn't particularly significant for in-house projects in any sensible company. We explained to her that given our responsibilities and the shortage of programmers, the chances of completing every planned function were close to zero. However, we suggested releasing a basic version of the app, without certain features, to a small portion of the users, perhaps around 1%. Later, we could update the app with the missing features and gradually increase the user base to 100%. She approved of this solution, and the entire team was informed of our plan. Thus, we continued our work as before, developing the new app while also tending to other apps, providing weekly progress updates on the new app. Fast forward to November during a short vacation I took. Upon my return, I discovered that the new product owner was furious with our progress, even though everything was proceeding according to plan. During my absence, she had informed our bosses that we were in crisis mode because the app wouldn't be ready by February 1st, placing the blame squarely on us, particularly me. As it turned out, her boss wanted the entire app to be ready, not just a basic version. She had never informed him about our agreed-upon plan, or perhaps he had changed his mind. Subsequently, she informed everyone that the original plan had always been to fully release the app, portraying us as liars. Unfortunately, nobody supported our side, and by that point, I had already begun searching for a new job because I had had enough. Ultimately, we had to eliminate numerous features because it had become impossible to complete them. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I remained at the company until the deadline, and the last task I performed was releasing the new app to every single user. One of the most crucial aspects of the app was the mobile ads, which generated revenue since the app itself was free. I created the ads exactly as instructed, testing them myself since the product owner hadn't bothered to test the app. Consequently, no one noticed that the new app had significantly fewer ads that appeared far less frequently. However, the app was plagued with bugs because we couldn't properly test everything given the workload and the lack of a tester within the short time frame. Within a month of its release, the ad revenue plummeted and users were dissatisfied with the app, causing many of them to migrate to other news apps. At this time, I was happily working elsewhere, and I heard that there was utter chaos surrounding the new app. Due to the revenue issues, the product owner and her boss even considered bringing back the old app, which was quite comical considering how poorly it functioned. The last time I checked, Even the most dedicated programmer, who had miraculously remained at the company for over a decade, had said, "Screw it," and left shortly afterward. Years later, she is still employed there. The current team remains understaffed and overworked, and the apps are riddled with bugs and poorly managed. Meanwhile, I have the best job of my life, and everyone has been extremely satisfied with my management for many years. The next one is an entitled people story. My dad is elderly and has some mobility issues, as well as recent health problems within the last half year. 2 years ago, my mom passed away unexpectedly after a brief illness, which has been very difficult to cope with as I was extremely close to her. For the past 6 months, I have dedicated a significant portion of my life to help my dad. I temporarily moved in with him to provide assistance. He has been in the hospital several times, but now he's back home. However, I have had issues with him over time due to his narcissism, and I deeply regret this period of helping him. I even resent it in some ways because he shows no respect for me. Unfortunately, my sister hasn't been of much help either. I have previously posted about this issue here. Despite living only 20 minutes away, she rarely contributes, and most of the time, I'm the one doing all the work. Even when she does come over, she tends to micromanage my actions. Recently, my sister suffered a mild concussion, preventing her from joining us on Father's Day. Usually, we gather on Sundays for brunch. When my sister informed my dad about her absence due to the concussion, he expressed disappointment, solely thinking about himself. This morning was one of the few mornings I had the chance to sleep in. Weekends are usually the only time. During weekdays, I wake up early to assist my dad, so I slept in for an extra hour, went downstairs to give him my card, and wish him a happy Father's Day. However, he had already gone up to take a shower. I went out to get coffee, and upon my return I greeted him again, gave him my card, but he seemed annoyed, barely acknowledging it. Later, after I took a shower, I went downstairs and asked him if he wanted to go out for lunch, as we usually do on Sundays. He replied that he thought restaurants would be too crowded today and declined. However, he added, "You can just make me some French toast." He frequently phrases requests as commands, saying things like, "You can make me X," or, "If you want something to do, you can make me Y." Politeness, such as saying please, is rarely included, and when I point that out, he becomes upset. I was extremely bothered by his demanding tone and explained that we didn't have the necessary ingredients for French toast. Nevertheless, I offered to prepare something else if he wanted. In response, he remarked that it would have been nice if I had woken up early to cook him breakfast instead of sleeping in. Keep in mind that I am 31 years old, dealing with a narcissistic father, and yet I have still sacrificed a significant portion of my life to help him. He shows no respect or appreciation for my efforts. On Father's Day, he expects me to wake up early and cook him breakfast as if I were a little kid, when in reality, our normal plan was to go out. I expressed to him that I am with him every single day, taking care of various tasks, and that I had anticipated going out today, as we usually do. His demanding and disrespectful nature greatly bothers me, as if I'm only there to serve him. The next one is an entitled parent story. This happened in 2009 when I was 15, and my sister was 11. I honestly don't remember it well. I had to call my mother to fill me in on some details, and it helped a little. My parents got divorced when I was 10. My mother got primary custody, but we stayed with my father for about 3 days a week, sometimes more. They took turns celebrating the holidays with us. We'd spend them with one parent in 1 year, and with the other one the next. In March 2009, my father and his then-girlfriend, Molly, broke up after he confessed to cheating with the woman that eventually became SM. Years later, I found out that affair had been going on for almost 2 years by the time he told Molly. He introduced SM to us in May, on my birthday actually, and they almost immediately announced their engagement. From that moment, she started trying to force us all to be a happy blended family, which usually meant forcing us to do everything she, or sometimes my stepbrother, wanted, and pretending my mom wasn't in the picture. SM and my dad started pushing her to leave us with them a lot more often than my parents had previously agreed, but she thankfully wouldn't budge. We started getting ready for the holidays in November, and SM started talking about a ski resort. Hotel, I don't know, it was 14 years ago, that she wanted to visit with us. It was a 3-hour car drive from where we lived, and was clearly more suited for couples, younger children, or the elderly. Neither my sister nor I actually wanted to go, but before we could say that, SM asked us when we'd be done with school so that she could book it for a 2-week trip during our winter break. I was happy to be the one to break it to her. We'd spent Christmas and New Year's Day with my father and Molly the year before, so it was my mom's turn to have us. My father and SM called my mother dozens of times to try to convince her to let them take us, insisting that SM was excited to spend Christmas with us and that the previous year's holidays didn't count because we'd spent them with Molly. My mom said no, as she'd already made plans, and the subject was dropped for a few weeks. Then, on our last day of school before winter break, SM picked me and my sister up from our schools. That was fine. We were supposed to spend a couple of days with my father before the holidays. What wasn't fine was that the moment we got into her car, SM said, "We're going to the ski resort, surprise!" She proceeded to tell us that they'd already packed our bags for us, and Dad would meet us there. I asked if my mom knew about this, and she said sure, but I knew that was a lie. I also didn't believe her when she said we'd only be there for a couple of days and would be back before Christmas. I figured they'd booked the 2-week stay they wanted and would probably guilt trip us both into staying once their couple of days were up. I was terrified. I didn't have a phone. My mom thought I was still too young to have one, didn't trust SM, and I could see my sister was even more scared. I told SM we didn't want to go. She said, "Fine, let's just pick stepbrother up from school." We picked him up from school. SM said, "Okay, now let's go to the resort." I said again that we didn't want to go. She said, "Fine, let's just find a gas station and fill up." That pattern repeated itself about 6 times over the next hour. Every time I said we didn't want to go, SM would make up an excuse and pretend to forget my plea. As we were about to leave town, my dad called SM. I heard them fight for a few minutes about something, and then she hung up. Stepbrother asked her what happened, but she didn't answer. Then she said, "I'm taking you kids to your mom's." She turned the car around and took us home. When we got there, my mom pulled us out of the car and screamed at SM to leave, which she did. My mom was hugging us and bawling as if she hadn't seen us in years. She didn't tell me the full story until a few days later. Basically, my mom called my dad in panic because he'd never told her we'd gotten home, which he always did whenever he picked us up from school. He was hoping she wouldn't call until we were already at the resort. My father knew that lying would do more harm than good, so he told her their plans. He tried to spin it around as something my sister wanted, but my mother didn't buy it. She told him that if SM didn't take us back to her place, she'd call the police. My father and SM took my stepbrother to the resort. For a few months after, they bragged about all the fun they had and all the things my sister and I had missed. Stepbrother later confided in me that he actually hated it. He barely saw his mom while they were there, and he spent Christmas mostly alone in their room. SM called us both selfish for trying to ruin their holidays. My sister actually felt guilty for a while, and I had to reassure her. My mom didn't call the cops or press charges. At the time, she didn't know if what SM did would qualify as a crime or if they'd actually help. She also feared that would ruin our relationship with my father, with whom she was still trying to stay on amicable terms. Years later, she told me she regretted not calling anyone, and that's the story of how I got my first phone. For some reason, I really hate this story, so much that I avoid talking about it. This text was actually on my drafts for almost a week. It's far from the worst thing SM has ever done, but it still pisses me off. I admit that writing it all down did help a little, though. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.